Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you ever so much for the introduction and also the invitation to come and to contribute to again to this wonderful conference. It's been my pleasure to have presented in years gone by as well. Clearly, we're in a virtual context too. So I extend my pleasure and my privilege to be able to come along and share this particular session with you. So as was said, I'm David Wright. I am director of the UK Safer Internet Centre and at the UK charity SWGfL, and it falls to me. I've been asked to come and share with you experiences that we've had, particularly to do with, as it says, violence against women and girls, particularly to do with one of the helpline services that we provide in the UK. Before I just start off on that, like I say, just an introduction. I'm David Wright. I'm director of the UK Safe Internet Centre, and the UK Safe Internet Centre is obviously one of the 31 European Safe Internet Centres, and it is with great pride that we're part of the Insafe network and have been since 2011. There's a lot of pride in that, and it's a pleasure to be able to come and contribute and share our experiences across the network. But by way of sort of introduction, further introductions to the sorts of work that we do, not just in terms of working with industry. So we're an NGO in the UK. So we work with a lot of industry tech platforms, and this information I'm going to share is all part of that activity too. Also working directly with children and supporting victims. So we actually operate a number of helplines, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, as well as going out and running sessions directly with children, with adults, with parents, with staff, and others, and obviously extending into government. As well. Because the conference is also supported by the ITU, we've done a lot of work too, contributed a lot to the child online protection guidelines, particularly that the ITU published the updated guidelines in June of last year. So again, there's a lot of overlap here too. So I extend that thanks to ITU to support this particular conference as well, and equally programs too, so educational programs. So our charity, we have a vision that everyone should benefit from technology free from harm, and so there's a number of educational programs that we also operate too. But I mentioned helplines there, and we actually operate 3 helplines. So the first one that is now just over 10 years old in the UK, we support the children's workforce. So those working with children, so predominantly that's schools, but also law enforcement, health, social care as well. And so what we see with many child protection, I'm sure many of you will see this too, with child protection cases, almost always now there's a digital dimension to them, there's a digital inference, and so that helpline works to take the digital out of the safeguarding instance, the child protection instance that they have. More recently, in December 2019, we operate the UK's Report Harmful Content platform. So this is, the realisation of some 7 years worth of work, and the realisation that content doesn't have to be illegal for it still to be harmful. And so, as is more recently been coined, lawful but awful content. That might not translate, I appreciate, but content that is legal but still harmful. And so the classification and helping victims of legal but harmful content to get some form of redress into what is, if they've reported content but it's not been taken down, or they've got a question about that, to be able to then provide them with some further support, indeed representation in half the cases to get content removed. But the primary purpose I want to come and talk to you about here is indeed the Revenge Porn Helpline. So We've operated the Revenge Porn Helpline in the UK. We do that on behalf of the UK Home Office. This was first established in April 2015, so we've been operating it now for just over 6 years. And it was set up to coincide with new legislation that was introduced in the UK as part of the Criminal Justice Act that made it an offence to post intimate images without consent. So this is known by a whole series of different things, and so it's just worthwhile highlighting who we do support, who the particular helpline supports. So it's set up to support adults who are victims of non-consensual intimate image abuse. For example, in Australia, it's known as image-based abuse. We have the helpline is called the Revenge Porn Helpline, which is a bit of a problem for us because in many cases the issues are not revenge, and it's not really victims don't recognise it as porn, and so non-consensual intimate image abuse is a much more accurate description about the victims that we support in this particular case. More recently, with enhancements to the law, we support those who have all had their intimate images threatened to be shared. So the offence here is the threatening or the sharing of intimate images without consent, and by virtue, these are adults, and so I'm going to focus here and probably deviate a little from the conference because I'm focusing essentially on women as victims rather than necessarily girls as victims, but obviously the same thing translates. And more recently as well, sextortion victims too, but I'll come back to that in a little bit. So what do we see? What do we see on the helpline? We see clearly intimate images being shared. Now that's often, if I may, for a moment, just typically generalise about this. We see images shared within a relationship. There'll be lots of similarities that you just heard, for example, from Anna. Images shared in a relationship, the relationship breaks down, and then images are then shared in either so-called revenge as well, shared online. I should add as well, so the context here, the images are not illegal in the UK. It's the act of sharing without consent that is the illegal part. What we're also finding too is that these images are actually being collected or indeed requested. So this is where we sort of get into the third bullet there around sextortion. So we've seen a dramatic rise during the last year and a half and COVID-19 restrictions, as many people, both men and women, turn to the internet to maintain some form of a relationship. Now we've seen a dramatic rise in sextortion, and I know that's the case across all of the European safe centres. We've seen that particular activity. It is no different from an adult perspective either. So mentioning collectors, those people actually setting out to collect these sorts of images from across the internet, searching them out. And the bottom point there, one around deepfakes too. So we've very much seen a rise. So to cause embarrassment, we've seen people actually take someone's image and post it onto a pornographic image that reportedly then to be somebody or the victim in this particular case. To cause, perhaps after relationship breakdown, not to cause direct physical harm, but to cause them very much emotional harm. So we have seen, a change more recently, actually in May this year, to extend the law within the UK to make it an offence to threaten to post someone's intimate image. But the sorts of other things that we see in terms of, these threats. So it can be very much part of an existing relationship. Two, in terms of threats, the relationship doesn't have to have broken down. There can be a threat, could be part of very much a coercive or abusive relationship. We've seen a rise in domestic abuse cases, and so sometimes the threatening to share someone's intimate images is all part of a very controlling and coercive relationship as well. We do very much see anonymity being a part of this, and certainly victims, we think, should be extended the opportunity to be anonymous when reporting these particular cases. We do see when you do report these to law enforcement within the UK, there's mixed responses, and we do see a lot of what is we would label victim blaming. So well, why did you take the image in the first place? Which is not hugely helpful if someone's threatening to post your intimate images. And so that is another thing that we want to see. It is very difficult with regards to this intention and threat, and how do you prove that? It is a very difficult thing. Again, as part of perhaps a coercive relationship, if it's verbalized, there's no necessary record. So, removing this intention to cause distress, which makes it quite difficult to prove, particularly prove a case. I mentioned deepfakes already, and so what we're calling for as well, we want to see the law future-proofed, and if there are certainly any policymakers on this call, then thinking about into the future, we very much see this being an increasing, so where someone takes your image and superimposes it on a pornographic image and then shares. So who is that image? And so it should be, the law at least should be able to accommodate those, and indeed the distress that it causes the victim, who it apparently actually appears to be. And finally, definition as well. We always think so intimate images. The title doesn't include the word sexual, because intimate images is much more descriptive. I think in some particular cultures or religions, the impact of what would be considered in others, so it doesn't have to be, somebody doesn't have to be naked for it to be considered an intimate image. If it's taken privately with the intention of it being private, then it could have exactly the same impact, I'd say, given cultural and religious context. So the definitions of these have to be really clear, I think, as well. So, who has the helpline supported? So we have, it says 10,600. Indeed, we've actually just passed now 11,000 individual cases that the helpline has supported since it started in 2016. The majority of those have been in the last 12 months. I'll come back to some of that information or evidence just in a moment. And this is the nub, this is the crux of this particular session. The majority of the people who call our helpline and seek our support are indeed women. So you can see 61%. And although having said that, we have seen, certainly at the start of lockdown, that sextortion, we saw a rise in men who were victims of sextortion. But then we've seen that also sort of tail off as well in the latter stages of some of the COVID restrictions. So this just kind of gives you a bit of an indication as well about the gender imbalance that we have with those that we support. Where victims and perpetrators are indeed known. The points down the bottom there around the number of images where we support men, then typically there are only a couple of images that are in question, whereas the majority of, so the females, the women that we support, the helpline supports, you can see there's a dramatic, there's sort of 80 images per victim. So a huge contrast in terms of the number of images that are associated in terms of both male and female. So this is, all I'm doing here is articulating this huge gender gap in terms of the experience that our helpline actually does receive in this particular case. Where do we see issues? So this is a breakdown of where the platforms are. So predominantly it's in some form of private messaging service, or also, as you can see, so Facebook, as well as adult sites, as well, where certainly the threat to post is very much there. The impact is so much starker. It says adult site there. That's where most of the content is actually uploaded to. Now we have seen changes more recently, particularly amongst MindGeek, Pornhub, for example. So whenever we report content to Pornhub, and here's clearly a pixelated image, they will instantly take that content down and then replace it with exactly this sort of image. But obviously, Pornhub have just gone through the removal of any kind of user-based content following the media coverage they've had in 2021. This is the sorts of graphs that again articulate the impact that COVID has had. So you can see. From 2019 compared to 2020, we saw an 87% rise in the number of cases that the helpline dealt with. It was huge. In terms of image removals, and the graph in the bottom right there, so we removed about 25,000 images in 2019, and in 2020 we removed 132,000 images. So colossal increases in seeking our support on the activities of the particular helpline. The vast majority, 84% of the cases where we know the sort of gender of both the victim and the perpetrator, 84% is a male perpetrator and a female victim. So again, articulating a significant gender imbalance. And this is the graph that highlights the impact that COVID has had on us. So this is the monthly caseload that the helpline has dealt with since going back to 2015. You can see a general increase up until March and April last year. So the red line was the projected calls that we had. The blue line was the actual calls and caseload that we had. So typically of doubling, and it shows no sign still of abating in 2021. 2021 cases have already exceeded that of 2020. So dramatic impact that COVID has had, and we just see the aggravated circumstances that lockdown has brought on the particular cases of non-consensual intimate image abuse. We've had some notable cases too. And so this one, which actually is going on at the moment, this individual is due to be sentenced. He's being found guilty. So this individual that the helpline was very much involved with has had more prosecutions served on him as than any other individual that the National Crime Agency in the UK has ever brought to prosecution before. So it is prolific in terms of the extent to which these sorts of individuals coerced and blackmailed particularly women in terms of sharing intimate images, both girls and women as well. We've seen the rise of subscriber-based platforms like OnlyFans of having an impact in this particular arena too. So that was worthy of mention. And just as I draw to a close, the positive aspects. So we've been involved since 2018 of a pilot with Facebook. So Facebook have got a mechanism that will allow potential victims, or victims who have had their images threatened to be shared, to go and hash their images, such that will then prevent those images from being uploaded onto Facebook, which is giving a huge empowerment to those particular victims. You can read some of those testimonies from those sorts of people and the victims indeed that we support. So there we have it, everybody. Just a real snapshot of the Revenge Porn Helpline and some of the experiences that we've been able to that we've received and we'll be able to share with you. Details, further information about the Revenge Porn Helpline and contact details indeed are there. And with that, I can now pass back on to the next. I hope that's been helpful. Thank you very much.
David, thank you very much for such an interesting presentation. I just wonder how it translates into our Polish reality. I don't know of any survey that would illustrate the same tendencies. But what I found shocking was this gender gap, like 1 to 80. So this is gigantic imbalance, gigantic chasm. Could you please explain, is it not so that men find it difficult to seek assistance, to ask for support, to admit that they are victims of some leakages of intimate images?
So yes, it's a great question, and like I kind of mentioned at the start of lockdown in the summer of last year, we very much did see a rise of males contacting us or contacting the helpline because of extortion, and we have that. We have seen through work with the National Crime Agency in the UK that's very much associated with organised crime, I think. So where they've actually targeted men, particularly men, in that case. In terms of, it's great that we were able to help support them in those cases. As to what drives, whether it's men or whether it's women to contact the helpline, that's a very difficult question for me to respond to, because we want to support anybody, or certainly any victims that are victims of this particular crime. The impact is enormous. So 38% of the cases have some form of associated mental health issues, and 4% have some form of suicidal ideation. So the impact is enormous on people's lives.
Thank you very much, David. I know that you're in a hurry and you need to go to your other duties, but thank you for being with us, and very warm greetings from Poland.